This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant, and I would say happy Wednesday, but I'm not even sure where we are in the week right now. For the next half hour, I'll be hanging with you, breaking down what's going on in today's news and what's got everybody talking. But first, let's get you caught up. 50% accuracy isn't great when testing just about anything. And according to the CDC, that also goes for antibody tests for COVID-19. In new guidance out today, the CDC says antibody testing is only right about half the time. They added those tests aren't really accurate enough to make policy decisions about people returning to work. All 50 states have lifted some lockdown restrictions related to the pandemic.
In Dragon SpaceX, unfortunately, we are not going to launch today. You are go for 5.100 launch scrub.
NASA was supposed to come out of spaceflight retirement today with the first launch from American soil since 2011, but that didn't happen. The launch was scrubbed with less than 20 minutes to go because of weather, but they'll get another shot at it Saturday. This will be SpaceX's debut for a manned mission with one of their rockets. The American astronauts will be at the International Space Station for 1 to 4 months, making sure NASA and SpaceX are ready for more missions just like this one.
Everybody in the world needs to be watching this. The world, please watch this.
And the firing of 4 Minneapolis police officers and the death of George Floyd, a black man, wasn't enough to keep demonstrators from marching to a police station Tuesday night demanding justice. At one point, police confronted protesters firing tear gas. Video of Floyd's death ignited social media and prompted people demanding anything be done. The FBI is investigating for possible civil rights violations. Violence against black men and threats of violence have been top of news and top of mind for a lot of folks today. And while these different incidents aren't on the same level, they feel connected because police interactions with black men so often lead to violence. To that point, this tweet really stuck with me. It says, "We should be drawing a straight line of racist terror from Amy Cooper to this Minneapolis cop. Too often, she's the beginning, he is the end." Video of Floyd struggling to say the same thing we heard from Eric Garner before he was killed by a police officer 6 years ago is something I wish I couldn't recall so easily. But this kind of thing seems to happen too often. Newsy's Jamal Andrus has more.
George Floyd died after a Minneapolis police officer used his knee on Floyd's neck to pin the man to the ground for more than 7 minutes. Tuesday, community members took to the streets.
I believe what I saw, and what I saw was wrong at every level.
Floyd is just the latest in a series of controversial deaths involving a black victim and a white officer or vigilante this year, reminiscent of a similar string of killings 6 years ago. In 2014, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Laquan McDonald, and Tamir Rice were all killed within 6 months of each other. This string of tragedies at the hands of police officers gave way to outrage and protests and helped solidify the Black Lives Matter movement. This year, a similar group of killings has emerged.
Now to a deadly shooting that's inflamed racial tensions in a Georgia community.
Ahmaud Arbery was killed in February in Georgia, but his case didn't gain national attention until this video was released, showing Gregory McMichael and his son Travis McMichael chasing and ultimately shooting Arbery while he was out for a jog. In Louisville, protests have continued on and off for weeks in reaction to the shooting of Breonna Taylor, who was killed during a police raid of her apartment in March. In a wrongful death lawsuit, Taylor's mother said the police didn't announce themselves before entering, and no drugs were found in the apartment. And most recently, George Floyd, who pleaded to police officers, "I can't breathe," before suffocating on the pavement like Eric Garner 6 years before.
I can't breathe.
The tragedy of Eric Garner was the fact that it was a nonviolent allegation of him selling Lucy cigarettes. Well, that's the same thing we have here with George Floyd, this allegation of a nonviolent forgery charge.
And while police-involved shootings have gained a higher profile over the past 6 years, they haven't slowed down. According to a Washington Post database, U.S. police killed more people in 2019 than in 2015, and that number has hovered around 1,000 people for 5 years straight.
This last couple of weeks with Ahmaud Arbery, with Breonna Taylor, and now George Floyd, what it tells you is it was probably just as many killings last month and the month before that, but they just weren't captured with objective evidence.
4 Minneapolis police officers connected to the deadly arrest of George Floyd were fired. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey announced his support for criminal charges being brought against the arresting officer. Jamal Andrus, Newsy, Chicago.
That story and this topic is a little heavy, so we're going to take a breather. When you're back, we'll put our focus on the world of plasma donations.
This is Newsy.
Moving beyond nonpartisan, Newsy is anti-partisan.
Because we're tired of pundits, of everyone else's opinion.
Be informed, not influenced.
As coronavirus spreads across the country, you might be looking for ways to make sense of it all. Newsy's here to help with some deeper context, explaining and reporting on the pandemic. Virology, only on Newsy. Be informed, not influenced.
People who've recovered from COVID-19 aren't just folks with harrowing stories to tell, although that may very well be the case. Many of these people are also potential lifesavers for other people infected with the coronavirus because of what's in their blood. In this installment of Newsy's Virology series, we dive into the world of plasma donations and why where you donate really matters.
Picture this. You contract COVID-19 and are fortunate enough to recover after a few days of symptoms. You've finally kicked the virus. And with your newfound energy, it's only natural you might ask the question, what can I do to help? A quick search pulls up a local food bank, grocery deliveries for the elderly, and plasma donations. Experts believe blood plasma from recovered coronavirus patients could be a game changer in the world's fight against COVID-19. But how this plasma is used and where you donate it makes a big difference. Plasma is a yellow-colored fluid that makes up over 50% of our blood. It contains things like glucose and electrolytes, but most importantly, plasma contains antibodies which help to fight infectious diseases. In theory, if a recovered COVID-19 patient donates their plasma, it could be used to boost a recovering patient's immune system. In a way, taking the active immunity from one patient and giving it to another. This practice has already been proven in a small amount of cases to speed up recovery time in COVID patients. Plasma has been used to treat outbreaks of SARS and MERS, and globally, plasma donations are common. But unlike much of the developed world, the US has both unpaid plasma donations and a for-profit industry for plasma. The Red Cross and many local blood banks rely on volunteer donations and send plasma directly to hospitals to meet short-term transfusion needs. But there's also a for-profit industry for plasma, which pays donors, many of whom rely on that money. However, most of that plasma goes abroad for expensive pharmaceutical therapies. Usually, there's more than enough plasma for both pipelines. But COVID-19 has created a new demand. And some experts are worried that the for-profit industry could divert donors away from where plasma is needed.
If they're giving the impression that it's somehow going to treat, the folks at the outbreak, at the senior home, in your community when they're hospitalized, in your community, that is more than likely misleading.
That's Dr. Adam Brzezinski. He and his team at Case Western University study these for-profit plasma donation centers.
It's a far longer supply chain that is, really turning those into a wide variety of plasma-based products. And it's extremely unlikely to be like antibodies that help grandma, probably not.
Across U.S. hospitals, plasma from recovered COVID-19 patients is in high demand and short supply.
Nationally, we currently have about a little over 6,000 people who've registered as potential donors on our website.
Dr. Nigel Paneth of Michigan State University is part of a new national group of experts looking into plasma treatments for COVID-19.
It's not near enough. I mean, look, 2,000 people are dying daily in the US. 2,000. How many people do you think might need treatment? It's probably tens of thousands daily.
And in his view, the companies offering up to $400 for plasma and sending emails to donors aren't helping.
We don't want people being paid who might otherwise be donors to hospitals, to blood banks, to the Red Cross, and so forth.
When you're deciding where to donate, Paneth, Przinski, and other experts recommend prioritizing donations to local blood banks to meet immediate needs.
But in the near-term crisis under COVID-19, those donations that go to the Red Cross and to local academic health centers, or even like a small community hospital that's holding a local blood drive, those donations are going to be far more likely to turning into like near-term addressing, preserving life in the context of the pandemic than would a paid donation at a plasma center.
Next up, HBO gives the world what it needs right now. Another streaming service.
Every patient was a dollar sign.
I do not think I was an aggressive dentist.
Losing your perfectly healthy teeth. How dare you try to do that to me?
Nothing's wrong with making money. If you're doing it ethically, absolutely not.
Twitter's been kind of in fuego over the last 24 hours, so we're gonna break down some of what's been trending. HBO Max is trending because it went live today, but not if you're using two of the biggest streaming platforms. HBO's new streaming service isn't available on Roku or Amazon Fire TV because HBO's parent company, AT&T, hasn't worked that out just yet. There's also some confusion about how HBO Max is different from the company's other but similarly named offerings, HBO Now and HBO Go. The NHL is trending as the National Hockey League announced plans to skip the rest of the season and jump straight into an extended playoffs with 24 teams rather than 16. Considering there are only 31 teams in the league, that just seems kind of mean. Even with this plan, the NHL isn't totally sure when they can start back up. They're saying July at the earliest. And All Lives Matter is trending, which can only mean one thing. Black Lives Matter is also trending. Across social media, people are popping off about the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis and the Central Park confrontation involving a white woman calling the police on a bird-watching black man. Per usual, Twitter is the sacred open forum of debate in our resilient democracy. Just kidding, it's a dumpster fire. By the way, we asked for your help in choosing our hashtag, and Newsy in the Loop is our winner. So if you want to rap with us or send me reposted TikTok dances that I'll never learn, just use the hashtag NewsyInTheLoop. New York State has the highest number of COVID-19 infections out of anywhere in the US, but the highest rate of coronavirus infections is actually in the Navajo Nation, a Native American territory covering parts of Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico. And while tribes are dealing with more infections, they're doing it without all of the funding they were meant to receive through the CARES Act relief package. Newsy's Angela Hill has the story.
Good, I wanted that to be a nice signature.
Back in March, the federal government earmarked $8 billion in aid to tribal governments as part of the CARES Act. But as the communities waited for the funding, the number of COVID-19 cases grew. Indian Health Services reported just over 8,000 positive cases on May 20th, and the Navajo Nation has the highest per capita rate of COVID-19 infections in the country, higher than New York. But it wasn't until early May that $4.8 billion of the $8 billion started flowing to tribal communities, well after the April 26 deadline set by Congress. Treasury has yet to distribute the remaining $3.2 billion.
So it's leaving tribes in a position where we are fighting this virus with fewer resources than we need, but also in the dark, without having a clear picture of how much funding is going to be allocated to each tribe.
Look, the reality is that the Navajo Nation and other tribal nations need as much help as they can get right away. There's no need for delay and no need to portion out the money so that they don't get 100% right away.
Part of the delay in distributing the funds was over how to allocate the money across all 574 federally recognized tribes and determine who qualified for the funds.
Treasury included Alaskan Native Corporations, or ANCs, in their calculations, which are for-profit entities. The decision to include the ANCs sparked lawsuits by tribal governments. In addition, there has been controversy over the formula used to distribute the initial round of funds.
It isn't really connected to the responsibility that tribal governments have to take care of their tribal members during a pandemic.
After tribes submitted all sorts of documentation to apply for the funds, Treasury settled on what some say is an outdated racial population number that is connected to a housing block grant formula.
You know, we've got nearly 17,000 people, and based upon what they used, it was based on a formula that account for about 5,000 people.
A recent study by the Harvard Project on American Indian Economic Development concluded that this formula creates demonstrable inequity in the form of gross and frequent underrepresentation and overrepresentation of hundreds of tribes in the allocation process. The Treasury Department has not made public the amount each tribe received from the first round of funding. Researchers from the study obtained the data Treasury used and reverse engineered the analysis to determine how much each tribe received in the first round of funds. In some cases, the housing data indicated tribes had zero population, not reflecting their true population count as submitted by the tribes last month. This resulted in those tribes receiving the minimum funding of $100,000.
We all should be concerned that there's this sort of arbitrary allocation of funds going on when tribes are so desperate. Their economies have been devastated.
Newsy reached out to the Treasury Department, but they did not respond to a request for an interview. Treasury asked tribes to submit additional financial and employment information by May 26 in order to receive the remaining $3.2 billion.
Really, at the end of the day, the people who are going to pay the price are Indian people in our communities whose health and safety is at risk.
Angela Hill, Newsy, Washington.
Across the world, every country has its own approach to the pandemic. And South Korea's approach has everyone asking, have they figured it out?
Miss getting email that isn't junk? You should know about Newsy's daily newsletter. It's breaking news right to your inbox. Get caught up quick with the best Newsy stories every day. Join us at signup.newsy.com. Be informed, not influenced.
At the end of February, South Korea had more COVID-19 cases than any other country except China. Despite that, the country has kept COVID-19 deaths under 300, and they've been slowly reopening schools over the past week. In the latest What Works miniseries, Ben Shimiso examined how South Korea addressed the deadly pandemic.
It's back to school time in South Korea. The nation's reopening practices for schools, professional baseball, concerts, and more are being closely watched by other countries. South Korea has been an object of international admiration ever since it contained one of the first COVID-19 outbreaks outside of China. So how did it do it?
The use of masks is something what people really follow from the beginning.
Stefan Klingebiel, director of the United Nations Center in Seoul, points to self-discipline and efficient testing and tracing measures. He was himself tested for the virus when he flew to Seoul in March.
At the end of March, test capacities in many countries, that was really a limitation, and Korean government did it for all arriving passengers.
Klingebiel received overnight accommodation and food while waiting for his test results, which came back negative the next morning. The government also asked him to download 2 apps to report his movements and health status during his next 14 days of quarantine.
So when I was late, for example, I received a call from those ministries, and I was asked to really submit my latest data.
Like Klingebiel, Min-ho Kim was tested for the virus when he returned to South Korea from Chicago.
They put us in a hotel, they got us free testing, and they gave us food for that.
Besides testing and tracing, Kim says South Korea's successful COVID-19 response comes down to the population's willingness to trust the government with special powers in a time of crisis.
One thing that is being overlooked is that how much South Korean citizens are willing to sacrifice their personal liberty just a little bit to have everything under control.
For example, the government sends emergency texts alerting citizens of nearby cases of the coronavirus.
It is a little annoying for sure, because My music gets interrupted all the time.
The whereabouts of every single confirmed patient is also available to the public.
We have the capacity of quarantining every patient if there is a case.
Another radical measure is how the country controls the price, supply, and demand of masks.
You can only get 3 masks a week. There is actually a day that you can get masks according to your date of birth.
But at the end of the day, Kim says it's all about South Koreans doing their part to keep the virus at bay. That also helps explain why South Korea never needed to impose a hard lockdown in the first place.
People understand that's just not a one-man endeavor. It's something that the whole community has to engage in.
For Newsy, I'm Ben Chamisso.
That wraps things up for us, but join us again tomorrow, same time, same place, for In the Loop. But don't go anywhere just yet. More top stories from Newsy are coming your way right now.